Naghirap ang maraming workers at members sa pagkaruling at pagsulisit sa bawat tao sa lahat ng dako dito sa ating bansa. May namatay, may na-aksidente, may nakulong, may mga na-rape pa na hindi na na-report. Dahil baka hindi paniwalaan, we were alone, I asked if I could just sleep on the sofa as it was a suite room. He insisted that I would sleep beside him. And even said in Bisaya, compatible gyud taging kay parehas man og color ang atong suot. I was proud to serve alongside a man I believe to be holy. But one day while in Manila, I received a long-distance call from him. He informed me that he had received a divine revelation intended for me and instructed me to travel to Cebu, where he would share this important message. He was also scheduled to preach in Cebu that Sunday. Upon arriving in Cebu City, we arranged for him to stay at the Park Place Hotel in Fuente Osmeña. Without a word, after turning off the light, he embraced me, undressed me, and violated me with his lustful act, and left me in shock and speechless. He then said, "This is the fulfillment of God's revelation." Humingi po siya ng kapatawaran at nagsabi na siya ay nautusan lang po na kailangan din akong iligpit. Pinaniwala po siya na ako ay may malaking kasalanan at ako ay napakasamang babae. Na tinukso ko raw si Apollo kayon Quiboloy. Nakiapid daw ako sa mga ministro. Nakipagtalik daw ako mismo doon sa workers' house at nagnakaw daw ako ng 3 million pesos. Di ba nagtugot man ang Ginoo pagpatay sa dautan?
Nung nagsimula kami sa aming hearing sa mga kaso ng human trafficking ni Apollo C. Quiboloy, tandang-tanda ko, ang sabi sa amin, Risa is biting off more than she can chew. It was unthinkable after all to go after a pastor who was believed to be able to command hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of voters. A pastor who was associated with a former president and an entire vote-rich province. A pastor na may sariling media outfit, may madaming mga kumpanya, at may sariling simbahan. Huwag mong banggain yan, sabi ng ilang mga well-meaning na kaibigan. Hindi mo kakayanin. Why did we push? We pushed because of the stories of young girls that we heard were being groomed into what he called pastorals and forced to provide sexual services to this so-called Son of God. Ang pakikipagtalik daw kay Apollo Quiboloy ay paraan ng pagsasamba sa Ama at pagsasakripisyo ng sarili para sa dakilang manlilikha. Tinulak namin ang pagdinig na ito dahil sa kwento ng mga batang puslit na sapilitang pinapalimos sa kalsada at hindi pinapag-aral para makabili ng helicopter, mamahaling sasakyan, malalaking bahay sa iba't ibang bansa, ang self-proclaimed Son of God. Hindi po ito katanggap-tanggap sa amin. Coming on the heels of the Senyor Aguila investigation, mahalaga din sa amin na siyasatin. May pagkukulang ba ang ating batas at tila hindi napaparusahan ang mga leader ng mga religious organizations na nagtatago sa balot ng religious freedom para pagtakba ng kahindik-hindik na mga kasamaan? Are our rape laws sufficient to navigate the gray area of consent, sexual agency, and religious freedom? Are our labor laws sufficient to address the situation of religious volunteers na sapilitang pinagtatrabaho at pinagkakaita ng mga benepisyo gaya ng SSS, PhilHealth at Pag-ibig? Ngayon po, nandito na sa harap natin si Apollo Quiboloy. Pilit na iniwasan ang Senado kung ano-anong kondisyones ang ginawa para hindi harapin ang ating pagdinig. 50 security personnel, private jet, 5-star hotel at iba pa. Pinarali pa ang mga tagasunod at binuli ang mga witnesses namin sa social media. Ngayon po, nandito na po kayo. Bumabagyo man, ay magkaharap na po tayong lahat. Today, Mr. Quiboloy, your victims will confront whom they believe to be their abuser. Wag po kayong mag-alala. You will also be given an opportunity to reply. Today, mga kasama, dear colleagues, sama-sama tayong matututo, maglalagom, magwawasto, at pinakamahalaga, maghihilom. We will all heal. At this point, pagdating po ni Majority Leader, mag-opening statement din sila. At sa ngayon, may I request our Committee Secretary to recognize the resource persons and administer the oath to those who are here for the first time. At ganito po ang ating daloy, ladies and gentlemen. Today is about the victim survivors. Matagal nang pinatahimik, matagal na tinakot. Ngayon po ay bibigyan natin sila ng puwang magsalita. Mayroon din po tayong mga witnesses dito na minsan nang nagpakita sa ating hearing. Para sa kanilang kaligtasan ay gumamit po sila ng ibang pangalan. Kung ano-ano ang nadinig galing sa mga taga-KOJC. Kesyo daw, duwag, ayaw magpakita ng mukha. Ngayon po, magpapakita na ng mukha at buong pagkakilanlan sina Yulia Tartova, nakilalang alias Sofia, Edward Ablaza Masayon, nakilalang alias Jackson, at Joar Martinet Olimba, nakilalang alias Jerome. Ang una po nating witness ngayong umaga ay si Teresita Valdehuesa, ang di umanong miyembro ng unang batch ng pastoral ni Apollo Quiboloy. Bago po siya magsimula, I would like everyone to listen to this video, to watch this video.
She contacted someone named Teresita Valdehuesa, who was a former worker here in the kingdom, who committed lapses of fornication with many ministers and men. That is why she was supposed to be disciplined, but she went out. This Alina Ostapchenko is saying things against me, and we were able to do record every bit of what she said. Listen to her voice. Everything that you have said to Teresita Valdehuesa, who is a former worker here, who also backslid because of some lapses in immorality, will give you a sample of her voice that was recorded. Go.
I'm fine, dear. I remember you, Bayo. And I'm so glad that I'm already out of the kingdom. And it's a miracle that how I exit from there. Because the time kasi I was so fanatic before. But when, time passed, I realized many things I can also share with you if you like. Ask me if I'm ready to dedicate my life. I said yes, because for me, I was thinking dedicate to God, so I never think about other stuff. And suddenly, he was on me already, and he was trying to pull my pants already off. And then things started to happen, and I understand that, oh my goodness, it's like I have to switch off my mind. I will not question, I will not ask if it's Father's will in my mind. That time, I will just not try not to feel anything like that. And because I was shocked by what's happening in the room.
You have to prove that in court. Because this is an international ministry, and I have an international reputation. You will be sued by the kingdom in all places that you've called. We will not let this pass. Teresita Valdehuesa will be part of this. So better get your lawyers and defend yourself. We have lawyers all over the world. Wherever there is a kingdom, we have a general counsel in the name of Attorney Michael Green. In America, we have 18 lawyers who are observing all the happenings in the kingdom. We have financial consultants. We have lawyers who will defend the kingdom wherever it is being attacked.
For the record po, yung pastoral na binanggit dito, si Ms. Alina, she gave her consent also to the playing of this video in this hearing. So, Ms. Teresita, meron po kayong testimonyang hinanda. Pwede nyo na pong basahin. You have the floor.
Good morning po, Madam Chair, Honorable Senator Riza Hontiveros, and to Honorable Senator Francisco Tolentino, and to all the members of this august body. I come here today to share the truth that has been silenced for 3 decades because of great fear, and this is also on behalf of the many victims who have suffered in silence just like I have. I believe my testimony reflects their pain, struggles, and resilience. While I understand that this is aimed to aid in legislation, I am also grateful to be given this opportunity to inform those who still believe that Apollo Quiboloy has been innocent of the crimes he is accused of because he has never been. At the age of 17, I became a member of the church led by this man, Apollo Quiboloy, in 1918. I was a freshman student. I was eager and active in the community, even spending a significant portion of my college years living at the parsonage where he resided. In 1988, I made a difficult decision of my life to dedicate this to his ministry, driven by the belief that true fulfillment and salvation lay in serving God fully. This choice meant leaving behind my family, my career, and the person I once was. Despite the resistance of family and friends, I pursued my conviction. I joined a pioneering group that struggled to meet basic needs, but my desire to serve God fueled my persistence. Over time, I gained his trust and became a respected worker within the ministry. As the ministry grew, so did our blessings. We experienced answered prayers and expanding membership, which deepened our commitment to serving God. Apollo C. Quiboloy, whom I revered, was considered as God anointed, and his words held absolute authority. I respected him deeply, viewing him as truly the man of God. From the moment I dedicated my life to the ministry until 1993, I experienced a profound spiritual awakenings. I felt forgiven. My love for God deepened. And I was proud to serve alongside a man I believed to be holy. But one day while in Manila, I received a long-distance call from him. He informed me that he had received a divine revelation intended for me and instructed me to travel to Cebu, where he would share this important message. He was also scheduled to preach in Cebu that Sunday. Upon arriving in Cebu City, we arranged for him to stay at the Park Place Hotel in Fuente Osmeña. That evening, he instructed me to remain in the hotel, while Nilda Linda, the assigned worker, returned to the worker's house. When we were alone, I asked if I could just sleep on the sofa as it was a suite room. Instead, he insisted that I would sleep beside him and even said in Bisaya, compatible gyud taging kay parehas man og color ang atong suot. Translated, we are compatible because our outfits were of the same colors. I was wearing red pajamas with white dots, while he was dressed in a red t-shirt and white pants coincidentally. His words made me feel uneasy and quite nervous, and I saw a different personality in him. But I was quick to dismiss that unusual feeling. And because I had previously witnessed Ingrid Canada or ICC, Teresita Dandan, TTD, and Velina Salinas slept in his room alternately, it led me to believe that it was just normal and harmless. Moreover, we had been conditioned to suppress any negative thoughts about him. We were warned that any suspicion on him would reflect our own personality, using the words found in 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15, I quote, "To the pure, all things are pure. But to those who are corrupted and do not believe, nothing is pure. In fact, both their minds and consciences are corrupted, unquote. And in those days, absolute obedience was a must. We needed to have an unquestioned loyalty and reverence toward him. Sleeping beside a man I believed to be chosen by God was for me then a great privilege, an opportunity for a sinner like me. But what followed shattered my sense of faith and trust. Without a word, after turning off the light, he embraced me, undressed me, and violated me with his lustful act, and left me in shock and speechless. He then said, "This is the fulfillment of God's revelation." He explained that God had revealed to him that I was to partake in God's life through him by surrendering my body, soul, and spirit. He also mentioned that other girls would go through him in a similar manner. His words were strange, but I was too shocked to respond. The following day after that Sunday worship service, Apollo C. Quiboloy left for Manila, while I was left to carry on with my duties, including organizing carolers for our annual fundraising. Confusion consumed me. I felt betrayed by my faith, by him, and even perhaps by myself. I began questioning whether what had happened was indeed God's will or simply a gross abuse of power. When I returned to Manila, I was once again instructed to sleep in his room. Fear gripped me, but defying the anointing of God was unthinkable. We had been taught that such disobedience would invite a curse. The next morning, he asked if I understood God's revelation. I remained silent, unable to process what had happened. He then referenced me to Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 to 12, explaining that just as Jesus humbled himself and obeyed God, even to the point of death, so he too must obey God's will by partaking in carnal things. He claimed this was necessary for him to understand the human experience and to fully empathize with others. He even told me that he had also been reluctant to accept God's revelation, but as God had chosen one, he had no choice but to act on it. I was more confused with his explanation, but I could not complain. I wanted to go out from the ministry, but I lacked courage. I did not know where to ask help. I had cut all the bridges behind my life, and I could hardly go back because it would mean starting all over again. My family was poor, and I had no connections. My option was to stay because I was still bothered with what if it was indeed God's will. December of the same year was an escape for me. Caroling as one of our sources of funds, and which had been participated in by every member of the ministry all over the country, became my excuse of staying away from the worker's house in Manila where he stayed. In January 1994, I was in his room with Ingrid Canada, the international coordinator of the church, Tessie Dandan, the national administrator for the church in the Philippines, and Felina Salinas, his personal assistant. During that,
Miss Teresita, before you continue po, yung nabanggit nyo ng 2 beses, Ingrid Canada, nandito po ba siya sa harapan ninyo?
yes, katabi po siya ni Mr. Quiboloy.
Sila po, yung nagtaas ng kamay. All right, salamat po. Please proceed, Miss Teresita.
During that meeting, he informed the girls that I would be included in the inner circle. Right there and then, I realized that these women had likely endured similar experiences. Without any words, we shared a mutual understanding. None of us dared speak about what had happened to us. In February 1994, I was sent to Hong Kong, still carrying all the confusions and emotional turmoil. Despite this, I continued to pretend that everything was fine. When one of our musicians, JC Pangilinan, was scheduled to return to the Philippines, I seized the opportunity to send a personal letter to ACQ. In that letter, I poured out my feelings, openly expressing my emotional distress. I was honest about how deeply shocked I was to learn of his life beyond the pulpit. The man I had revered as a holy figure was in reality an ordinary mortal, one who had exploited my genuine commitment and dedication to God. My faith wavered, and everything I had once believed was shattered. I prepared myself for a harsh response, expecting a violent reaction from him. To my surprise, there was none. Instead, I was sent back here. Upon my return, I was even more surprised to learn that I had been promoted. I was appointed National Crusade Coordinator, National Logistics Coordinator, and Luzon Area Administrator all at once. This was a sudden and significant promotion from my previous role. By God's grace, I excelled in all my assigned tasks. Despite this, fear gripped me every time Apollo Quiboloy would come to Manila. My only relief was when one of the girls would accompany him, giving me an excuse not to sleep with him. I kept myself busy, visiting satellite churches to distract my confusion and agony. One day, ICC confronted me saying, ACQ sensed my distance. I made my work an excuse. February 15, 1998, ACQ used me again. It was always out of fear that I obeyed, a fear mixed with anxiety that he might knew how I pretended to be extremely grateful that he allowed me to be a part of his physical life, because in all honesty and God truly knew I was not. All the pent-up emotions suffocated me that on the following day, while preparing for church, I collapsed. ACQ performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but later I learned, he told others, that it was just a way for me to seduce him, labeling me as Jezebel the Temptress. I was instructed to prepare my documents for my USA visa, and I believe realization came later when I already left from his group, that it was also to distance me from the workers and members here that I might be able to tell his dark secret. I never wanted to go to America because inside of me were unresolved spiritual issues, confused mind that bothered me always. But my visa was approved. I didn't know that I was to lead and plan for the fundraising to be done in America, and we would employ the same strategy of our money making here in the country. In America, I witnessed the double standard life. What we prohibited in the Philippines, we did them there. We lived in luxury. We toured around. We dined in fine and expensive restaurants. We watched movies. Sky's the limit when they went shopping. I decided to stay in the apartment where the minister and his family lived. Despite the insistence of ICC to stay with them, I refused. I made a lot of excuses. Sapagkat, hindi ko po natin na kaming nasa Amerika ay masyadong nagpakasasa sa paggasta sa pera na masyadong pinaghirapan ng mga kapatiran at ng mga full-time workers. Bilang namuno po sa crusades, evangelism at logistics departments, saksi po ako kung paano nagsakripisyo ang bawat isa para lang makapagbigay sa iba't ibang pangangailangan sa simbahan. Nakita ko na kahit pambili ng bigas ng membro, kailangan sakripisyo pa para lang maibigay sa simbahan kahit gugutumin pa ang mga pamilya. Nasaksipan ko po na kahit last centavo para pamasahe, kailangang ibigay pa rin. Bahala nang maglakad papuntang simbahan ang mga mahihirap na membro. Hindi kinaya ng aking konsensya ang double standard life. Maraming workers ang napalo dahil sa panunood na ng sine, pero kami sa Amerika, halos linggo-linggo nanood ng sine, bawal sa amin ito dati. Naghirap ang maraming workers at members sa pagkaruling at pagsulisit sa bawat tao sa lahat ng dako dito sa ating bansa. May namatay, may na-aksidente, may nakulong, may mga na-rape pa na hindi na na-report. Dahil baka hindi paniwalaan at baka makapag-fasting pa dahil may kasalanan na itinago, kaya napahintulutang nangyari. Lahat may kota, di ba? Napakasakit po sa damdamin ko dahil ako po ang namuno sa mga fundraisings. After December season, ang mga members kailangang magtinda ng mga kakanin para maibigay sa mga pledges for alay kay Kristo, building funds, love offerings, television pledges, tithes, and others. And when they could not provide for their own foods, they would just resort to fasting. Meron din pa akong quota, 10 to 15 million pesos to raise in the month of December alone. I organized the carolers nationwide to meet my quota. We recruited and trafficked our young people from Mindanao and Visayas to carol in the provinces of Luzon and in the national capital region cities. Marami pong estudyante na Nobyembre pa lang kailangan nang mag-absent sa paralan at ang iba hindi na nakabalik sa pag-aaral dahil inuna ang simbahan, inuna ang pagkaroling, inuna ang paghanap ng pera. But nobody questioned where our income was spent. Sa mga buwan ng Pebrero hanggang Oktubre, ang ibang workers na nasa logistics department kailangan mag-solicit na naman throughout the country using the permits of the different associations. Pag-asa ng buhay, Children's Way Foundation, tulong sa may kapansanan, handog ng pagmamahal, pagdamay sa dukha, Shivers for Christ. The supposed income na dapat ibigay sa mga beneficiaries sa mga nasabing associations, hindi naman talaga truthfully and honestly na ibigay. Only a little portion of the income was shared to the beneficiaries. Ang ibang workers naman, walang hinto sa pagtinda rin ng mga kakanin na may quota of 500 to 1,000 pesos a day, Monday to Saturday. Ito ang buhay ng mga workers na nasa logistics department. In America, they began to notice my indifference. ICC called my attention, stating there were reports from my assistant in the logistics department in Manila that I had secretly sent money to my family. Then, she informed me that ministers wrote letters to ACQ and reported that I tempted and fornicated with them during my visits to their satellite churches. I was so shocked to learn of the sudden accusations. I also wrote a letter and enumerated the real circumstances of my life with all the ministers I came in contact with in relation to our aggressive fundraising, being the National Logistics Coordinator. However, that was not enough. I was then forced to write a long letter of confession, making it appear that I was a sinner who committed all kinds of sins, including those I had committed before joining the ministry. I complied, believing that through this written confession, I would be totally forgiven from my old sins and burdens and be completely sanctified. In detail, I wrote everything I thought was considered sin I had committed from childhood until the present. I also implicated ACQ in my sins. It had the same tenor of the letter I wrote in Hong Kong in 1994. And this time, he was furious. Then ICC instructed me to revise my letter. I was told not to implicate ACQ and to state that I was the sole sinner and I was filthy. Upon realizing how angry ACQ was, I revised my letter out of fear and stated that I had sinned because I truly was filthy. In detail, I imagined sins.
Ms. Teresita, yung paulit-ulit yung binabanggit na ICC, sino po yun?
Ingrid Chavez, Canada.
Sila pa rin po. All right. Please proceed.
In detail, I imagined sins and I made it appear that I had committed them all. That was how stupid I was to obey and exaggerate my story. Just to appease the anger of our leader, Apollo C. Quiboloy, not knowing it would become my death sentence later. My exaggerated story was then distributed to all his leaders and ministers, and they believed I was filthy, I was pervert, and I was wicked, painting me as the sole guilty party, while ACQ remained innocent. Little did I know this confession would lead to my condemnation within the ministry.
And Ms. Teresita, pag sinasabi nyo ACQ, sino po yun?
Apollo Carrion Quiboloy po.
Alright.
October 15, 1998, I was sent back here to receive a punishment through prayer and fasting in the guise of spiritual discipline. And the fasting they planned for me was beyond my imagination. It took me 7 months to suffer hunger and isolation in the mountain of Tamayong in Kalinan, Davao City. They placed me in a small, dark, elevated room beside a kitchen, separated only by a mat and walls. My bed was rough, made of uneven slabs, with exposed nails pressing into my back as I slept. I woke up this morning in pain, with no beddings, and the cold October nights left me shivering. I requested a blanket and a mat, but I was denied. Every day from 8 to 5 p.m., I followed a strict routine, regardless of the weather, enduring hunger and isolation. No one allowed near me, as I was labeled filthy and deserving of this punishment. Members were forbidden to speak to me. I was physically very weak and so depressed. I prayed that God would just take my life. Ilang beses po ako nanalangin na sana kunin na lang ng Panginoon. I started to question God and wondered if this was truly a divine process or simply human punishment. I asked myself, is this ACQ's way of retaliating because I rejected the life he imposed on me? It felt like vengeance and disguised as spiritual discipline. My only solace came from reading the Word of God, from Genesis to Revelation, over and over again. Every day was a struggle of faith. I struggled to believe that the process was still the perfect will of God for me. I struggled to believe that I really was a sinner and that I was recuperating from my spiritual disease for the lack of faith. That was to justify my present pains and to at least lighten my burden of loneliness. On January 8, 1999, I gave ACQ a resignation letter and I requested for a fare so that I can travel back to my home in my province. He did not approve my resignation letter. I pleaded to Ingrid, and like a child, I cried for help. But she remained untouched, telling me that it was a divine process. After that conversation, misery doubled. I had no money, and I was still physically weak, so there was no way for me to go out from the compound of the prayer mountain. Waiting for the restoration was the only alternative at the moment. If not for the comforting words of God, surely I would be totally gone out of my mind. They continually accused me of sins they alone knew, unimagined, that would always lead me into fasting. It eventually hardened my heart because I started to realize that the purpose of doing it was to totally break me down and to even slowly kill me. I no longer saw the reason to stay. I submitted my resignation as a full-time volunteer worker for the second time. But Apollo Carrion Quiboloy refused it again. A week later, on September 30, 1999, I decided to leave without asking for permission, determined to free myself from his control. It was only when I left out of the group that I finally clearly understood that the man I had believed to be God's chosen and holy was an impostor, oppressor, and deceiver. He manipulated me using his authority and power as God's anointed. I thank God that he took me out from his bondage, from that ambiguous feeling of fear mingled with so much love and loyalty to my Redeemer, Jesus Christ. But he was not finished with me and did not stop terrorizing me. Alex Camia, his personal bodyguard, a full-time worker, once known to be a champion in gun shooting before he joined the group of ACQ, together with his team, kept coming to my place to harass me, serving a fake warrant of arrest to a minister who stayed in my house. This minister settled in my place after he was gunned down in Davao City but survived. The team of Alice Camia was apprehended, and when investigated, they had several firearms in the car, several plate numbers, and there was also a red plate. The registered owner of the car was Apollo C. Quiboloy. Because of their failure to serve the warrant of arrest, they blamed me for hiding the minister and filed cases against me of obstructing justice and grave misconduct and an act unbecoming of a public official. After that incident, I heard that Alex Camia was the suspect of the murder of an ex-worker who was shot down inside his home, and this ex-worker did not survive. I was scared to death when I heard this news. My option was to remain silent because killing could have actually happened when Camia and his group came to my place. There was also an ex-worker, Elsa Bolivar, who was a senior citizen, a woman shot dead while she was in her garden in Tagum City. I was so hysterical when pictures of her bullet-ridden body were sent to me because she had just visited me in my place before it happened. Fear consumed me, and I remained silent. 3 years ago, nagkausap po kami ni Alex Camia. Humingi po siya ng kapatawaran at nagsabi na siya ay nautusan lang po na kailangan din akong iligpit. Pinaniwala po siya na ako ay may malaking kasalanan at ako ay napakasamang babae. Nang tinanong ko kung ano ang aking kasalanan, sinabihan daw siya na tinukso ko raw si Apollo Quiboloy. Nakiapid daw ako sa mga ministro. Narinig naman po ninyo yung sa video. Nakipagtalik daw ako mismo doon sa workers' house at nagnakaw daw ako ng 3 million pesos. He even said in Bisaya, di ba nagtugot man ang Ginoo pagpatay sa dautan? Doesn't God permit the killing of the wicked? Doon ko lang naintindihan na kailangang i-declare ni Apollo Quiboloy sa lahat ng mga workers at members na ako'y makasalanan at napakasamang babae para magiging makatwiran ang lahat ng parusa na binigay sa akin at magiging makatwiran din kung bakit ako kailangang patayin. Apollo Quiboloy called me Jezebel, the temptress, using his pulpit to broadcast how filthy and evil I was. This became a pattern. Kung may mga workers na may alam sa kaniyang buhay, sa sikretong buhay, at aalis sa kanyang kingdom, sila ay akusahan ng napakaraming kasalanan. He would always exaggerate their weaknesses at ipaniwala sa mga workers at members na sila ay umalis dahil may mga marumi at mga napakasamang mga tao. His followers only heard his side of the story, which was always filled with lies and twisted truths. The other side, our side, was never heard and was never allowed to be heard. They only believed whatever he fed them and even defended him and attacked those who defied their leader without investigating the truthfulness of the circumstances. Nakita naman po siguro natin kung paano siniraan ng mga workers at defenders ni Apollo Quiboloy ang mga testigo dito. Mga napakasamang descriptions para lang ipahiya ang mga nagsalita ng kanilang mga karanasan sa loob ng kanilang kingdom. Mga salitang hindi nababagay sa mga tinatawag na mga citizen ng kingdom of Jesus Christ. Their intention is only to demoralize and warn others of the consequences of defiance. Last August 2021, during one of his television programs, he once again maligned me, broadcasting nationally and internationally that I was a fornicator and an immoral woman, which we have just watched. Madam Chair, I would like to remind Mr. Quiboloy to remember the biblical stories about the lives of King Nebuchadnezzar, King Sennacherib, and King Herod. All of them fell into the hands of the Lord. Nebuchadnezzar, you know that, was separated from his people and lived like a beast and ate grass for 7 years. King Sennacherib died a tragic death, murdered by his own sons. King Herod was struck by the angel of God, died, and his body was eaten by worms. Their sin was that they replaced God with themselves, considering themselves as gods and blaspheming the one true God. This is all, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Salamat po, Ms. Teresita, sa testimonya mo. Kahit kailangan mong iyakan para basahin sa amin. Bago yung isa munang follow-up question ko sa inyo, gusto kong i-acknowledge yung presensya online ni Senator Cynthia Villar. Salamat, Senator Cynthia, sa pagdalo nyo. At ang Minority Leader, Senator Coco Pimentel. Salamat kaayo sa pagdalo. Kung walang opening statement si Senator Coco at si Senator Cynthia, bago yung interjection ni Majority Leader sa Department of Justice, isang mabilis na follow-up question sa ngayon, Ms. Teresita o Ms. Ging, Ate Ging, just for the record, guilty ba kayo dun sa mga krimen na inakusa sa inyo, yung pagnakaw ng 3 million pesos, yung pag-fornicate sa iba pang mga ministro? Guilty ba kayo sa mga iyon?
Of course not.
All right, salamat kaayo. Majority Leader, for your interjection with the
Thank you, Madam
DOJ.
Chair. Nothing to do with the previous testimony. Magpapaalam po kasi ako kasi magsasalita po ako sa Liga ng mga Barangay and the Minority Leader is already here to fill up some legal questions likewise. But Madam Chair, before I leave, gusto ko lang tanungin ang hindi ko kasi nakita kanina, dito pala ang Department of Justice relative to my previous questions answered by the DFA. This is speculative, academic, and purely legal. If, wherever, if an extradition request is lodged before the DFA, there is under the PD, which I cited before, a process which would necessitate the Department of Justice to file a petition. But that is another court. And that is another court which would constitute as the extradition court here in the Philippines. And if there is going to be an extradition hearing, the purpose is not to determine the guilt or innocence of the accused, but whether they would fall under the ambit of our extradition treaty. Is that correct? Who will answer? Attorney Torribillas or Attorney Quintana? Speculative lang ito. Ano lang to?
Senior State Counsel Quintana, I believe, Majority Leader.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Your Honor. As to the as to what will happen on, should the Department of Foreign Affairs later on receive a request for the extradition of Mr. Quiboloy and the present criminal cases are filed against him, the Philippines, as a requested state under the Philippines-US extradition treaty, has the option to postpone the filing of the extradition case, in which case,
Postpone.
only the filing, Your Honor.
But is the extradition court would be constituted here in the Philippines.
Yes, Your Honor.
Not necessarily the court where the hearing is being
Yes,
conducted.
it would be a separate separate proceeding, and as I mentioned, it might be postponed or we can accept the request and file the case in a separate extradition
It
case.
will not be a criminal court.
No, Your Honor. As you correctly pointed out earlier, the extradition court is not there to determine the guilt or innocence of the subject of the request.
Thank you, Attorney. But my second question is related to the first question and to the previous questions. The extradition shall not be granted under Article 4 when the person sought has been tried, convicted, or acquitted. Tama po ba yun? So pag may pending case na rito at mabilis yung proseso, conviction or acquittal, hindi na siya pwedeng i-extradite. Is that correct?
Your Honor, under Article 4, that may be a ground for refusal of the request for extradition, but that in that case, so Your Honor, ang ano po dun parang in effect parang double jeopardy. But in this instance po, there is no double jeopardy kasi po yung
Saying double jeopardy. One of the grounds for refusal would be when there has been a trial, conviction, or acquittal that's explicitly stated under Article 4 prior prosecution. Double jeopardy will not apply because of the concept of dual sovereignty. Am I correct?
yes, Your Honor.
So, ang tanong ko, mas makakabuti ba na mas mabilis ang trial sa Pasig which would result in either conviction or acquittal dahil hindi na pwedeng ma-extradite?
Sir, it's independent of the request for extradition. So regardless if the criminal cases are terminated, are expedited, it will not affect the extradition request.
Siguro, aralin niyo mabuti itong Section 1 ng Article 4. Parang very explicit naman ito. You still have time. Number 3 question, I learned that correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure you're following this through news accounts, that the Department of Justice of the United States dismissed the charges against a certain Miss Dueñas. Tama po ba yun?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, and this was just a few weeks ago.
Last week, Your Honor.
Last week.
October 7.
So, ang tanong ko rito, and this will probably be a lingering question, what would be the effect of the dismissal of the U.S. cases against, is Dueñas a miss or a male? Ano ba yan?
He.
Female? She? Female.
Female.
What would be the effect of the dismissal of the U.S. cases against Ms. Dueñas to the pending cases of Pastor Quiboloy in the Philippines, since some of the elements would be the same?
Your Honor, if I may defer to Prosecutor Torrevillas.
Torrevillas.
Deputy State Prosecutor Torrevillas, please.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Senator Tolentino. It will not affect the cases pending against Pastor Quiboloy, considering that Ms. Dueñas is not one of the accused in those cases.
One of the accused in cases pending before the Regional Trial Court here in Pasig or in the United States Department of Justice? Saan po? Saan jurisdiction?
Before the Regional Trial Court of Pasig and Quezon City, Mr. Senator.
So it won't affect.
Yes.
But there is an interrelationship between the elements involved in the U.S. cases and the Philippine cases. Tama po ba yan? And probably I'm not jumping the gun on what the defense counsels were doing. So walang effect. As I've said, this is just speculative.
It will not affect the cases pending before the Regional Trial Court of Quezon City and the Regional Trial Court of Pasig because Ms. Dueñas is not one of the accused, neither she one of the witnesses for the prosecution.
But some of the defendants in the case pending before the U.S. Department of Justice are likewise defendants, are accused here in the Philippines. And I understand there would be a second hearing come May 20 before the U.S. Department of Justice. Tama po ba yun?
I am not aware of that.
Okay. So paano naman kung yun ang magkaroon ng ibang desisyon while pending dito sa Pasig and Quezon City yung ibang kaso? Any speculative answer? O kung wala, mahirap na
It
siguro.
has no connection at
No
all
connection
because,
at all.
opo.
Different jurisdictions, different elements. Again, Madam Chair, maraming salamat po sa pagbibigay sa akin ng pagkakataong makapagsalita. I reiterate again my earlier statements that respect and dignity should permeate the entire proceedings today. And I hope that the dignity of the Senate through this committee will be enshrined, Madam Chair. Maraming salamat po sa pagkakataong ito at maraming salamat sa mga resource persons natin na dumalo. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat. Dagang salamat.
Maraming salamat din po, Majority Leader, and of course, the Chair and the whole committee ay nakikiisa dun sa patuloy na pagtaguyod ng respeto at dignidad ng Senado at ng Senado para sa lahat ng lumalahok dito sa ating mga pagdinig. So, balikan po natin si Ms. Teresita, si Ate Ging, mga patuloy po na follow-up questions ko sa inyong testimonya kanina. So, batay po pa rin po dun sa testimonyang binasa nyo kanina, anong taon nga po kayo sinimulang abusuhin ayon sa inyong testimony at alaala?
It was in October of 1993.
October of 1993. So, 31
Years ago.
31 years ago po.
Yes po.
Alright. Tapos ulitin ko lang po yung nabalitaan kong fasting o dry fast. So, hindi kayo pinakain, hindi kayo pinainom ng tubig. Ilang araw nga po ba ginawa ito sa inyo? At wala po bang kasamahan ninyo doon na sinubukang tulungan kayo?
Of course, nobody would ever dare help me because upon instruction na hindi nga ako and they were not even allowed to talk to me, nor even to come near to me. So actually there were two sets of fasting given to me. One set was, there was 10 days fasting. There was no food, no water. It was Ninit Ukyas who gave me the list of instruction, and number one in the list is to do dry fast for straight 10 days.
Sino po nagbigay ng instruction?
Ninit Okyas.
Nenet Okyas.
Yeah.
Okay po.
And then, I only was able to eat a little amount of rice and viand on the 39th day because when you had fasted, hindi naman kailangan kakain ka agad. So, there was water, then then lugaw, and then finally on the 39th day, that was the time I was able to eat rice. And then after that, there was that second round of fasting, which was even more miserable. It started on February 6, 1999, and there were other workers also. And that was very miserable because it was like this. We were given 5 days or sometimes 7 days. It was a kind of a series of fasting. The first, second, third days were for dry fasting, meaning you were not allowed to drink, of course, to eat food, dry foods. And on the fourth, sometimes it's water, sometimes it's sometimes it's lugaw. Then another 5 days, the same pattern. Sometimes it became 7. It ended on the it ended on the month of May because I have my diary on that.
So yung pangalawang dry fasting, 3 buwan na may iba't ibang klaseng fasting for 5 days or 7 days, 1 to 3 days na dry fasting.
Yes.
On the 4th day may tubig o yung yung pinakuluan ng sinaing, di ba? Yung pinapainom ng mga lolo't lola natin sa mga baby nung panahon ng World War II.
Yung sabaw ng ano po.
Sabaw.
lugaw.
Sabaw ng lugaw.
Yes po.
Or lugaw. So over 3 months, may ganitong series ng mga iba't ibang klase ng dry fasting.
Yes po. But I was together with other workers also because they were also punished, but I was the longest. I stayed there for the longest 3 months.
And yung una pong dry fast, yung unang set ng pagpapadry fast sa inyo na 10 araw, walang pagkain, walang tubig. 10 araw na walang tubig at 10 araw na walang pagkain?
Yes po, that's true.
Paano niyo po na-survive yun?
I did not even think I would survive.
Opo.
Because of course, the place is cold, was cold. And then every time in the morning when I took a bath, so parang doon ko na lang nalalasap yung tubig. Kaya I keep taking a bath 3 times a day.
Iniinom nyo na lang yung
Halos, hindi ko na mainom
tubig
kasi
pampaligo.
natatakot ka namang baka masira yung tiyan mo. Parang ganun lang, parang
And after 39 days, ganun ulit, pinainom muna kayo ng tubig, ng
And
and then pinakain ng lugaw, and finally, kanin.
yes, on the 39th day. But there was a month, I think it was month of December, may kinain na rin ako doon. Kaya lang, again, maybe they were not satisfied with the result. Maybe they wanted me to really slowly kill me. So again, I had another series of fasting that was, as what I have said, it started on February 6th and ended on the month of May.
During those 2 times po, yung dalawang set ng dry fasting, yung unang 10 araw at yung pangalawang umabot ng 3 buwan, nakakulong kayo noon or were you restrained in any way?
No, I was just there in the mountain, in the prayer mountain, not really kulong, but the place is big naman. So I had to go to the prayer house. I had to pray, I think, 3 times a day. 9 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 4 times a day. 4 and then 6 o'clock in the evening.
And kanina sabi nyo dun sa pangalawang set ng dry fasting sa inyo, over 3 months, may ibang workers pa kayong kasama, bagamat hindi sila kasing tagal na pinadry fast tulad ninyo. Bukod dyan sa pagpapadry fast, yung ganyang abuso sa inyo, meron ka bang na-witness na iba pang mga pang-aabuso sa iba pang workers?
Yes po. Actually, there were workers who were placed in a closed tent. Parang Bartolina, ang tawag namin doon Bartolina. They were placed in a closed tent. There were even torches placed around because during the evening they would put fire on the torches, and then they put and peed inside the tent, closed tent. And then, of course, they suffered too much heat in daytime and the colds in the evening. But eventually, they managed to escape one by one. But the only one who survived, she was rescued because she was dehydrated already.
So the only one who survived, na-rescue,
Yeah, it was Lani Alfaro.
dehydrated, si Miss Lani Alfaro. Ano po nangyari dun sa ibang nag-escape dun sa mga tents na yon?
Actually, because there were ministers who were also used as their security guards, they were actually helped by the ministers to just escape.
So may mga minister din naman na naawa sa kanila at
Meron din.
tinulungan silang makatakas.
Yes po.
Okay. Tapos, Ms. Teresita Atiging, tama po ba na naging subject kayo ng attempted assassination? Ito po ba yung sinabing ginawa ng angel of death?
Of course, I would really think that way because I was just a mere worker, a civilian, and then why would these people come to my place, bring those firearms? They were there, and if it was only to serve the warrant of arrest for my co-ministers, why would they have a backup car? And I was made to believe that it was really their intention to harass me and to terrorize me in my place.
May dala po silang warrant of arrest? Saan
Yes.
galing po yung warrant ngayon?
As I have stated, there was actually one minister who had a problem, no? Then he was gunned down in Davao City. Then I actually helped him settled in my place. And then
Ito po yung
He was-
nag-survive ng assassination attempt.
survived. Then he was served by that warrant of arrest. And then, because he was in my house, I helped him actually.
So nung pumunta yung mga may dalang firearms at may backup vehicle, yung sineserve nilang warrant ay para dun sa nag-survive sa assassination attempt na kinupkup nyo.
Yes po, actually para sa kanya. But I was made to believe that ako rin, pwede rin nila akong patayin. Bakit? Because there was one time, there was, because he was, that Alex Camia was with a policeman. Bakit kailangan nila akong parang i-scale nila yung opisina ko? Bakit parang tinitingnan nila kung nasaan ako doon? Kung ang gusto lang talaga, if they really wanted the warrant of arrest to be served with that person, why came to my office? For what? So
Yung Alex Camia ay may kasamang pulis o siya mismo ay pulis o PNP?
no, he was with a policeman,
With-
an official policeman during that time. At saka meron din po siyang kasamang, siyempre, driver. At saka, because I only learned later that there were two vehicles actually, but during those times, isa lang ang alam ko. Nung nakausap ko yung backup driver, kasi he is with me now, doon ko lang nalaman na may backup driver, may backup vehicle pala sila.
Ngayon, Ms. Teresita Atiging, pioneering member po kayo ng
Yes.
KOJC. Alam nyo rin po ba yung business model ng fundraising ninyo at paano ito nagsimula? Sinabanggit nyo, naging head kayo ng logistics, kayo po nag-organize ng mga caroling, yung mga solicitation. Paano po yun nagsimula at anong alam niyo dun sa kabuuang business model?
Yes po, the caroling really had become, or maybe has even until now become, one of the sources of funds in the ministry. In 1988, I was able to join here in Manila, and we were only caroling the cities, within the cities of the NCR. But when I was given the opportunity to lead the fundraising, I made it nationwide. I actually organized the nationwide caroling, Madam Chair. Then what happened? I had every province. I had leaders overseeing 70 to 100 carolers, including adults who would be cooking and washing their clothes. And in the NCR alone, we had, I think, 13 leaders overseeing 20 to 30 members also, do caroling from 8 o'clock in the morning to sometimes 10 o'clock in the evening, going around the cities of Manila, just caroling, all the people here in the Metro Manila. Then, because I had a quota of, it started with 10 million until it became 15 million. Of course, they also had a quota. I also gave them the quota to meet my total quota of 15 million.
So, sa bawat probinsya, nung ginawa nyo ng nationwide yung caroling, di na lang sa NCR, may isa kayong leader na bawat isa may 17 to 100 carolers. At dito naman sa NCR, kung saan kayo nagsimula, naging 13 leaders na may 20 to 30 members each. So, i-multiply lang po natin. So, sila po yung pinapatawan nyo noon ng quota para mabuo yung 10 to 15 million pesos. Ano po ito? Per day? Per week?
No, that's 1 month of
15 per
caroling.
month.
Yep, yes.
Per month. And so 14 hours a day sila pwedeng nagka-carol, nag-fundraise 8 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yes po.
Ganun po katagal. Alright. Dagang salamat, Ms. Teresita Atiging. Please stay on sa hearing natin dahil yung mga kasama kong senador, mga kauban ko, including our minority leader, may have questions for you. Yes, the minority leader would like to interject now. You have the floor, Senator
Okay,
Coco.
Ma'am Ging, no? So, dito lang ako nababahala sa sinabi mo na dry fasting,
Yes
2
po.
times ang experiences mo. And sa experience mo, it was a form of punishment.
Very much a form of punishment. But it was actually a disguise, like a spiritual discipline on me.
Okay,
Because
pero it was presented still as a disciplinary measure.
Yes po.
But have you seen dry fasting as a form of a ritual or not as a form of a punishment? Is it also practiced there?
Actually, there were two meanings, no? Of course, when we were instructed to do dry fasting, we would always consider it as our sanctification, as our cleansing on us, because we would always believe that we were always made to believe that we were sinners, and we do accept that we were sinners, So we had to go through fasting.
In the two particular, sa mention mo kasi dalawa, ang particular
Yes, po.
cases, hindi ko na matandaan yung mga months. Pero in your particular case, punishment.
At first, I did not consider it as punishment.
No, wag yung consider. How was it presented to you? You have to undergo dry fasting as a punishment?
Spiritual discipline on the first,
Oh.
talaga spiritual discipline.
Kung andun yung discipline, punishment. Di ba? Okay. Yung
Yes,
pangalawa,
Yes po.
yung pangalawa, was it what? A punishment also, yung pangalawa?
Mas lalong punishment on the second round. Maybe
Okay.
because they saw me alive still and still kicking. It was not their intention to really see me alive.
Okay.
That's why I had my second series of fasting.
But sa observation mo, tagal ka dyan sa kingdom meron, you also undergo fasting as a part of a ritual, not as a punishment. Tama?
Yes, there were many times.
As severe as dry fasting?
No, mine was actually was the worst.
Yun yung mga fasting na alam natin, yung babawasan
Yes, po.
mo lang yung
Yes, po.
quantity ng kakainin mo, siguro ganun, ano?
Yes, po.
Yun ba yung meaning ng, yun yung sa ritual?
Yes,
Okay.
ritual.
Ngayon, sa karanasan mo, ikaw kasi, obviously, nag-survive ka nung dry fasting mo as punishment Sa personal knowledge mo, meron kayong kasama sa KOJC na nag-suffer ng masamang consequence as a result of dry fasting as a form of punishment?
Wala naman akong
Wala kang
alam
alam.
because I left 1993.
1999, you
pa
left
po.
1993? When did you leave?
1999 pa po.
1999. Sige po. Pero sabi mo, founding member ka, so, pero wala kayong nakita pala. Okay,
So far, wala.
kasi sana, kung meron, i-encourage natin sila ngayon na magreklamo sila because this might be a violation of the revised penal code. How is it enforced pala? How is it enforced? Sabi mo kasi sa Prayer Mountain, you're free to roam around Pwede kang gumalaw. So paano kung super gutom ka na? Can you cheat? Can you cheat on the dry fasting punishment?
We were tempted to do that, but because we're so afraid, baka madagdagan pa yung araw pag malaman.